This video is brought to you by patreon.com/worsttake. Get access to exclusive live streams and Discord servers, on-screen shoutouts, and early access to some videos when you join now. Help make sure that we can continue to make content like this by supporting the Patreon. Links are in the description down below. All right, so we are at the second to last regular season game that we're going to talk about for the rewatch. So we're down to the final three, right? This game, the Jets game, and then the next game versus the Texans in the wild card game. And of those three, this is probably the least eventful one. This was an ass whipping, right? The Browns just put boots to ass to the Texans in this game. Joe Flacco did a great job of managing this game. I thought his best job managing in any game, probably outside the New York one, but I have to watch that one again next week. So we'll see where I'm at with that. But I thought he did a good job managing. He only threw 2 interceptions. One of those interceptions, I don't really think is his fault. It was because Dustin Hopkins was out the game and you couldn't kick a field goal. It would have been a field goal. We'll talk about the havoc that wrecked on this team and how it cost them 8 points basically throughout this victory. But yeah, Joe Flacco, I thought he did a really good job of managing the game. He took care of the football, made some really nice throws in the red zone, and he played well, right? Threw the ball up, gave Amari Cooper a ton of chances, and Amari Cooper was unstoppable in this game, by the way, in 50-50 situations. They just couldn't do anything about it. And any time they were able to get him kind of singled up against a corner or stemmed up to one, he was going to cook them. He cooked guys. He cooked all the corners that Houston threw at him. And that brings me to another point that I hear a lot when people talk about Amari Cooper is that people I hate when people do this. I hate when people over rely on traditional stats to make their points. And then 2, within that over reliance of those traditional stats, if they see an outlier game, they go, well, though that doesn't matter, right? Like Amari Cooper, I forget who made the video, one of these football channels. I remember recording a video, or not recording, doing a video where I was reacting to it. And the guy's point was like, yeah, Amari Cooper had 1,200 yards, but he had 200 yards in one game. So he really didn't have 1,200 yards. And I think arguments like that are so stupid, because just because Amari Cooper had a good game, a really good game, does not mean that his production doesn't matter anymore. Like, was the Houston Texans, or were the Houston Texans not a NFL defense? Were the Houston Texans not throwing out there one of the best young corners in football and Derek Stingley on Amari Cooper? Like, what about that performance should be discounted? Now, if you want to say the Browns' defensive performance on the other side should be discounted because of the amount of injuries that were apparent for the Texans, right? Being down to Case Keenum, no CJ Stroud, I think there's a legitimate argument there. But for people to want to discount Amari Cooper's yardage in this game as if he did not earn these legitimately against number 1 string NFL defense just makes absolutely no sense to me. And it just kind of exposes how these stats that people act like make the whole point for them don't really mean as much as they think they do to them, because they're willing to disregard it when it's convenient to make a point. And it just, I think Amari Cooper takes kind of expose that with a lot of people, where they just kind of say wild shit. I don't even get why it's so polarizing with Amari Cooper. I think it's pretty obvious that he's pretty good. But he was really good in this game, over 200 yards receiving, earned every single one of them. I mean, these were 50-50 ball situations, a lot of contested catches. This wasn't like that game where like David Njoku, I'm not talking about the Jets game. I'm talking about the Jacksonville game where David Njoku had like 2 touchdowns and like 115 yards, but like none of those passes were contested. So you could say that he kind of just ate off of some bad defensive discipline. But again, that's how yardage happens. With Amari Cooper, even if you want to make that argument, and again, I don't think that argument is a good argument to make, even if you want to make that argument in the case of Amari Cooper, you can't, because these were a lot of contested catches like that he made, a lot of contested sideline catches, a lot of like really hard catches. Are very impressive game. And the fact that some people try to use this performance to discount what he did the whole season, it just shows me how ignorant some people can be sometimes when talking about football, and how little people watch things that they talk about, which is very disturbing. Like we just be feeling free to talk about shit we don't know about as if we know. And I feel like that's going to have dire consequences in literally every single bit of discourse that's out there. But especially, well, not especially, but with football, you see it happen. People be talking about football, don't be watching it. Zadarius Smith in this game, really good, had 2 sacks, should have had 3. Martin Emerson was a bit of a disaster in this one. I think he wiped out one of Zadarius's sacks by getting a illegal contact penalty on like a screenplay or something like that too. It was really bad. But we'll talk about MJ in this game in a little bit. But Zadarius had 2 sacks, and he had a QB hit that led to an interception. So very, very productive. This is the Zadarius Smith that I hope the Browns get more of, right? We talked about how Dalvin Tomlinson last week was the Dalvin Tomlinson you want to see 5 or 6 times instead of 1 or 2 times like he did last year. With Zadarius Smith, you want to see Zadarius Smith do this more than like the 2 times that he did it last year. You want to see him do it 5 or 4 times next year, and really get that production where it should be. And the pressures need to be a little bit more effective than they were last year, because when you get a ton of pressures, when you're winning on a line of scrimmage, but you're not making tackles and you're not really affecting the trajectory of pass plays while you're getting those pressures, you're really not doing anything. So Zadarius, this is what you want him to do. This is kind of the game that you want him to replicate. If you're looking for what peak Zadarius Smith should look like in next year, you want to look at this game. We talked about Joe Flacco. One of the things I see with Joe Flacco is how different his play style is than what I perceived coming in. Because when you hear about Joe Flacco, when you remember Joe Flacco from Baltimore, you think of a guy who gets rid of the ball quickly and takes a lot of checkdowns. And that, for a little while, was Joe Flacco early in his career. What Joe Flacco eventually evolved into was a gunslinger, like somebody who just likes to throw the ball up. And Joe Flacco, and I mean this in the best and most honest way possible, Joe Flacco is somebody who, when he arrives on the football field, if you're a wide receiver, you should get excited, because he's going to give you an opportunity to make plays. If you are a defensive back, you should get excited, because he's going to give you opportunities to make plays. Joe Flacco be giving out opportunities. That's what he be doing. There's offensive, defensive, it's indiscriminate. He be throwing up them opportunities. And in a game like this, where Amari Cooper is unstoppable in 50-50 situations, those opportunities are going to lean towards the offense. There are some games where those opportunities do not lean towards the offense. Ironically enough, the second Houston Texans game that the Cleveland Browns played in the wild card is a game where it just doesn't go in Joe Flacco's favor. He's, in a lot of ways, a forgotten template of what an ideal backup quarterback should be. Because when we think of the backup quarterback template, we think of the really safe, boring guys, the Chase Daniels, the Case Keenums of the world, the guys you could put in and you know they're not going to mess it up. Right? They're going to call what you, they're going to run what you call. They're going to throw what you're supposed to throw. If they see the protections, or not the protections, the coverages that they think they're supposed to see, they're not going to be extraordinary. They're going to be low risk, low reward, and you can get away with it as long as you have either a dominant running back or only if you need that guy for a couple of quarters. But if you need a backup quarterback to play a stretch of games, not just 1 quarter or 2 quarters, then that guy is borderline useless. Because if we've seen it, if you start Case Keenum for like 8 games, you're not going to win a lot of those games, because ultimately you need somebody to be willing to make plays from the quarterback position. And Joe Flacco, while he's going to give opportunities for turnovers, he's still going to give opportunities for playmakers to make plays. So you're going to have a more explosive offense with a guy like Joe Flacco versus Case Keenum. I think we saw this in this game because Case Keenum played for the Texans in this game, and it was a absolutely abysmal decision by D'Amico Ryans in this game to start him because he was bad. Like, the Browns' pressure got to him very early. Then he got in late down situations. We know Case Keenum ain't got an arm, so once you get him in 3rd and long, he can't really do nothing with it. And then they put in Davis Mills, and it's instantly a lot better because Davis Mills is just more willing to make throws down the field. He's more willing to take chances. And I think that's the flaw when we see a backup quarterback. We think so much of what most teams put as their backup, which is the safe coach guys, but those guys aren't the kind of backups you ever want to play. Like, you would rather have a Gardner Minshew play for you as a backup than a Case Keenum. Even though Gardner Minshew's not good, he's still willing to take risk, and that's better. Like, PJ Walker was more effective than DTR during this season because PJ Walker, for all his flaws, for all the turnovers he will create, he will get you some throws that will get you back into the game if the game is close enough. Go look at the Indy game, right? Even the Seattle game, where a lot of people say he threw it away, he also threw you back into that game as well. So, but it's more sustainable to have that at your backup. And I think that's why the Browns went the direction of getting a Jameis Winston in the building, because Jameis brings the same things that Joe Flacco brings to the offense, but he's younger and he's more familiar with where the Browns offense is going versus Joe Flacco, who we've seen what he looks like trying to play in the system that the Browns are trying to move to. And it wasn't pretty, right? Like, that's when you get some of the worst years of Joe Flacco's career, is when you see him out there in the New York system or his later years in Denver. So that's something there. I touched on this earlier. I thought Martin Emerson was bad in this game. He was. One thing with Martin Emerson that I did not mention in his video that he really does need to clean up: he gets way too many penalties. Yeah, Martin Emerson was the 4th most penalized defensive player in all of football last year. He had games where he just have runs and runs and runs of penalties. I understand he's aggressive. I understand he's physical, but there's a way to do that without being in the top 5 of penalties. Like, I can live with him being in the top 20 in penalties. I think that's just going to be what it's going to be, the trade-off for him playing that style. He is going to naturally get more penalties than not, but top 5, I think, is a bit egregious and over-eager. It just shows some over-eagerness by him that's not necessary. So Martin's got to clean that up. In this game, it was atrocious how much he was getting penalized. And it's his one big flaw that he needs to fix, which is these penalties are kind of ridiculous to the points where you notice them with Martin Emerson. So that's my one thing with the defense in this game. Other than that, the defense was the Browns defense going up against Case Keenum, which is to say they dominated Case Keenum when he was in there. The only time that the Texans offense got room to breathe was either like after a turnover or when the starters went out. That was the only time the Texans offense got room to breathe. Again, you expect this. It's the Cleveland Browns defense going up against Case Keenum. The Browns defense, one of the best NFL defenses in a lot of metrics in like 10, 15 years. Case Keenum is Case Keenum, and it's old Case Keenum. Like, the domination absolutely happened, but was absolutely expected and necessary. Now, another thing that happened in this game is that the Browns lost Dustin Hopkins on a kick return touchdown that went the other way at the end of, I think it was like at the midpoint of the second quarter. And that had an interesting effect on this game. It didn't end up mattering because the Browns won this game by a comfortable margin. But what that meant was that the Browns had to go for 2 for the rest of this game. They scored 3 touchdowns. They got 2 2-point conversions. So we could just do the quick math on that. 4 extra points, 3 touchdowns. If Dustin Hopkins is healthy, you'll probably have 3 extra points on 3 touchdowns. So we're talking about a +1 difference in losing Dustin Hopkins because of extra points, which you might say, hey, worked out good. No, it did not work out, because also, in addition to those 3 touchdown drives, there were 3 drives in this game where the Browns either turned the ball over on downs in field goal, like in clear field goal range, or threw an interception on 4th down in clear field goal range, simply because, and obviously because, they had nobody to kick the extra points. I know some people wanted Bojo to kick in this game. Look at them kickoffs from this game and tell me that's somebody you want kicking a damn field goal. Bojo's kickoffs were awful in this game. I don't think he should have even touched kicking a field goal. Like, I thought, honestly, David Njoku had a better chance kicking those field goals than Corey did. But nonetheless, you look at those 3 opportunities, those are 3 pretty makeable field goals for D-Hop. That's 9 points. So you subtract that 1 point with the 9, you get to 8 points. The Browns missed out on 8 points for not having Dustin Hopkins. Now, it doesn't end up mattering because, you won by a large margin, but it is something that I find interesting. Just that guy being out, even in a game where the offense is playing super well, can still cost you 8 points total. It's an interesting swing there, just not having your kicker. And that's probably why the Browns were eager to extend Dustin Hopkins, because they realized that having somebody who's reliable at that kicker position is pretty useful. So that's it there. Also, this run that the Texans went on at the end of this game, I know some people were wondering if that could have illuminated what happened in the playoff game. It doesn't. It was just a lot of picking on Mike Ford. And I don't want to go too hard on Mike Ford. I feel like because he had to play a lot, I have to talk about him a lot in this one, and he didn't even play much in this one. But Mike Ford's just not a good cover corner. And every time he's out there, teams know it. They pick on him. That's basically what happened. But yeah, it was just Mike Ford again taken advantage of. But that's it there. That's the rewatch. Now we're going to get to week 17, and then we're going to get to the wild card game as we also get into the preseason starting up for the Cleveland Browns. So starting to be in a really exciting time to be a Browns fan or just a football fan in general. Thank you guys for watching. Y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.